Let it be known that I'm fully aware of the many controversies surrounding this game, and how that makes this game an easy target for people that just want to drag it through the mud. Understand that this is not one of those videos, or at least it's not intended to be. I did my best to go into this game with the mindset of a normal player who just happened to stumble across the game on Steam, putting any and all personal bias I had accrued to the side to form an opinion solely based on whether this is a good game or not. Also, some information about this series before we kick off episode 1. This series could best be described as an in-depth first impression, sometimes turning full review. If I'm enjoying my time with a title or on the fence about my opinion on a game, I might play into the endgame to see how the game plays once level cap has been reached, to form a more whole and complete review on a game. On the contrary, if I'm genuinely not enjoying my time with a title, or deem the game as a don't play from a very early point, I may just outright abandon a review. Anyway, enough of that. Welcome to MMO Questlog, and today we're questing in Bless Online. Bless Online is a 3D open-world fantasy MMO built on the Unreal Engine 3, developed and published by Neowiz, and was released in the United States and Europe on May 30th, 2018. However, this was not the game's first release. Since 2016, the game was released in Korea, Russia, and Japan, and was met with rather unenthusiastic reviews. For the 2018 release, Neowiz is promised better optimization, a UI rework, and a tweaking of the game's systems, as well as revamped combat. I, of course, am playing the 2018 release, available for free on Steam. Starting the game, you have two choices of factions, the Hiern and the Union. That accent over the O means nothing. Note that if you make a character on one faction, you cannot make any characters of the opposite faction unless you delete your characters or move to a new server. There are 4 races. Each faction has the same races, though they have different names depending on which faction you choose, but aesthetically are the same. You have your basic humans, your standard elf archetype, the Lupus, a large beast race that resemble wolves, and the Mascus, another beast race but being considerably shorter than all the others and resembling humanoid chipmunks. This character creator is fantastically deep. There are sliders galore, or alternatively, you can just drag around your character's various body parts to an almost goofy degree. You can make some really detailed and good-looking characters, or some rather disturbing characters with the longest, thickest legs possible and short, skinny arms. There's tons of cosmetic options like makeup, scars, tattoos, eye color, and the like. I personally opted for a preset as I'm awful at creating characters, but if you have a knack for this sort of thing, you can end up spending way too much time in here. Classes are as follows: Berserker, a large axe-wielding melee class, the Guardian that uses a sword and shield, the Ranger, which is an archer, a Mage, a Paladin, and an Assassin. The Mystic and the Warlock are currently locked and aren't yet available. The game has 2 combat modes, standard tab targeting and non-target aka reticle combat. Reticle combat just means you use your mouse to aim at and target what you want to attack, as opposed to using tab or click to target an enemy. The game has a typical fantasy setting, with noble humans in their large cities, once immortal elves that are centered around the forest and a tree of life, Zeppelin-style airships, wyverns, and dragons. No floating castles or anything in particular has really stuck out to me to make this game's world feel truly unique. With that being said though, it is a very pretty game, when it works. The recording you're seeing is the game running at a graphics preset of 2 out of 5, and it's still decent looking, but due to the abysmal optimization, I can't seem to get the game to a higher preset and keep a steady frame rate. While I know my PC isn't top of the line, and I would fully accept that it's a hardware issue on my end, using the task manager to see my PC's performance, my CPU and GPU are both running at 50% usage while recording, which would mean my PC has the capability to do more, but due to the game running so poorly, it doesn't matter. There's a community-made guide on Steam on how to get your game to run better by making a whole bunch of tweaks to the INI files, which I followed once I had heard about it about halfway through my time with this game. Now, if someone dares say you can't complain about how the game performs if you haven't followed that guide and made the necessary changes, they're completely wrong. The point is, you shouldn't have to. Neowiz claims they were bringing better optimization to the table with this 2018 release, and many would argue it's worse than what it was. It would be different if it was still in beta, or you were trying to squeeze just a few more frames per second out of a low-end PC, but to edit INI files to get the game to be in a fluid and playable state 6 months after its full release is just flat out unacceptable. After following the Steam guide and making the changes, such as allowing your game to use all of your VRAM as opposed to the default 1GB, setting it to use all of the cores in your CPU as opposed to just one, and some various other settings, I expected massive improvements. But unfortunately that was not the case. The only real improvement was the game recovering quicker after effort stumbled, but FPS would still tank for no obvious reason and not come back up again until I just stayed still for a while and let the game get its bearings. Inconsistent overall is how I would describe the performance. This game has some beautiful music when it's not played to the point of annoyance. The tracks are rather short, and at times it's obvious when they end and loop again. When questing in the open world, the area's theme will be playing, then switching to the combat theme, then we'll start playing the area's theme again from the beginning. I hope you can imagine how annoying this would get during Kill and Collect quest, where you're constantly in and out of combat. That's not to say the songs aren't good though, the main menu theme in particular being one of my favorites. It's music that fits the fantasy theme very well, with lots of orchestral scores and wind instruments, big booming tracks to mark the intensity of battle, and soft calm melodies for questing in the woods. I'm serious when I say I'm going to be adding this game's soundtrack to my D&D playlist for when I'm assigned disc jockey in the Discord. Audio quality, on the other hand, is a very mixed bag. Again, the music sounds fine, but the most noticeable issue with the audio quality is when one of the NPCs talks at you, which, by the way, almost all of them are voice acted similarly to the way they are in Elder Scrolls Online. That being, they tell you where to go, what to do, or deliver story to you, in usually 1 or 2 sentences, which was honestly surprising to me. I wouldn't exactly call the voice acting great, as there are some fantastically goofy lines and stiff or awkward reads. But the real issue is the audio quality itself. It sounds like the voice actors were recording in a bathroom stall rather than a studio, and it's obvious how terribly compressed it is.
Your argument, human. The Emperor, plotting against the elves.
My name is not human. It's Matthias Hobbit.
There's also this out-of-place voice that tells you when you've entered a protected area, a skill is on cooldown, or you can't attack the target you've selected. It sounds almost robotic, like an AI. I feel like it would be much better suited for a sci-fi game.
Please select a valid target.
Finally, we're on to gameplay. Upon loading into the game, you're put into a small tutorial area where you're taught the basics of movement, combat, and your skill book. You then fight a monster you cannot beat to be introduced to the game's death mechanic, which is either paying cashed up currency to res on the spot or spawning as a ghost and running and finding your corpse. Then you are immediately sent to your race's starting area. Main quests are marked with a blue star, and you'll be following that breadcrumb trail for quite some time. Tutorial quests, called Learner Quests, are marked with a green star, optional and mostly just consist of showing you the game's various systems, going to shops, gathering, the auction house, things like that. Side quests are marked with an orange star, but you won't be seeing those until a bit later into the game, probably around level 10. The combat, skills, and skill progression in this game are rather interesting. As opposed to having skills bound to all the number keys, Bless opts for what they call a rhythmic combat system. In essence, it's a combo system very similar to Terra. If you haven't played Terra, don't worry, we got you covered. Basically, when you cast an ability 1 through 3, it opens up a potential 3 more combo abilities which can be activated with their respective keys, R, T, and Y, then following that up with another choice of 3 abilities, and usually ending in a high damage finisher. If that sounds confusing because I'm terrible at explaining things, take a gander at the skill tree here and maybe that'll help. To make things a little more confusing, some classes have stances you can switch between. This basically changes to a new set of 1 through 3 abilities and opens up a second set of combos. Then there are non-chain abilities. Bound to 4 through 7 are abilities that don't combo and that you can fire off at what seems like whenever. From what I've come across so far, it seems mostly utility abilities like magic armor, resource generation, or movement. My first experience with this system was underwhelming, as I had picked a mage and the combo system wasn't exactly fantastic with it. My attacks would be firing off a fireball, comboing into an instant cast fireball, and comboing into another fireball. It just wasn't as impactful and didn't really feel like combos. The mage might have felt better if it had more abilities, but the starter experience was very meh. Switching to an assassin, on the other hand, was a very different story. Having moves that comboed into one another quickly made the system as a whole feel much more fluid, although I've read that at endgame this combo system loses its charm quickly, as you'll usually stick to the 1 or 2 combos that do the most damage. After finishing your race's starting zone, you're taken to your faction's capital city, as well as handed a mount. For a game that touts its rhythmic combat system, you really don't get to do a lot of fighting at the start of the game. It's running back and forth across the city, talking to NPC after NPC, delivering messages and the like. The first hour and a half of questing you do is terribly boring, as while the game may be trying to introduce you to the story, all it really does is shout exposition and the game's politics in your face, which is always annoying as you have no idea what the hell anybody is talking about. This game takes the route of shoving the story and the lore in your face as opposed to letting you slowly uncover and learn about it as you quest. From the perspective of my Hired Elf, at level 5 I was named the Chosen One and told that only I could save the Tree of Life from being destroyed by the current Emperor, and now it's my job to go out and find the true Emperor so he can reclaim the throne from the one that wrongly usurped it. All because I solved a riddle and fought a couple of monsters I could have killed by sneezing on them. I like starting off as the nobody adventurer, pulling weeds and culling wolf populations. Even in a theme park MMO where your character is more than likely going to become someone important anyway, it just feels more organic to ease players into the world and the lore. Touching on questing, it's about as bog standard as it gets. Kill X amount of these, kill these to gather X, interact with X this many times. Nothing too stand out or surprising, and rewards for them are rather boring as well, just XP and a few silvers. The exception of this so far is the solo dungeon the main quest sent me to at level 13, where I was tasked with fighting my way through a dungeon with 3 bosses, a couple traps, and of course some trash mobs, to rescue 3 NPCs. You need a gear score of 1500 to enter this dungeon, as approaching the entrance portal will just tell you your gear score isn't high enough and give you no direction from there. And if you've just been following the main quest up to that point, chances are you won't have the gear for it. Luckily, there's a vendor right outside the dungeon that'll sell you a whole new set of gear for just a few silvers, and you'll be good to go. I seriously enjoyed doing this dungeon, as I finally got to fight enemies with big enough health pools that I could really get a feel for how my class played. Before, while questing, the combat just kind of felt spammy, firing off whatever ability to no concern of what exactly it did, because most enemies were dying in 3 to 4 hits anyway. In this dungeon though, I had to consider what abilities did what, manage my resources, remember what combos did the most damage, and avoid abilities to keep myself alive. Although the fact that I'm praising Bless for finally showing me how its combat system works 2.5 hours into the game should really paint a picture for how mind-numbingly boring questing was up to that point. The community is relatively quiet, mostly sticking to faction chat and only chirping every now and again when they're trying to form groups. It's mostly free of spam and toxic arguments. Every once in a while someone will pop in and try to start trouble by talking bad about the game, but are annoyed and eventually go away. Something very surprising, especially for a free-to-play game, is I saw only one gold seller in chat, who posted only once and was never seen again, either promptly reported or removed. People in chat are pretty friendly though, as whenever I had a question it was met with a straightforward no-nonsense answer. I ask about better performance, to which I was directed to that Steam guide. I ask about how long the dungeon finder takes to form a group, to which I was told to not bother using it because there aren't enough people playing. It's rather sad, as this community knows that the game they're playing is considered dead by most. As my question about the dungeon finder was quickly followed up with being told to not bother with PvP either, as again, there weren't enough people. The game currently sees a peak player base of around 2,000 people according to the Steam charts, which is far better than what it was doing as a buy-to-play title. Oh yeah, I don't think I've mentioned that yet. In May 2018, Bless launched as a $40 buy-to-play title, and was hit with so much backlash and negative reactions to the poor optimization and broken promises that its player base quickly went from a peak of 34,000 at launch to an average daily peak of 600 players by October. That's just 4 months later. On October 23rd, Neowiz announced that Bless would be going free-to-play in an attempt to get some players back. When it went free-to-play, the population spiked to nearly 5,000 players. It was the jump the game needed to put some life back into it, but it's been on a steady decline ever since. And with them merging the 2 remaining servers into one on December 19th, 2018, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets permanently shut down in the early half of 2019. This cash shop uses a currency called Lumina and comes in quantities of $1,200 for $10, $2,400 for $20, $3,600 for $30, etc. With one absurdly large package costing $200 and giving you almost 30,000 Lumina. Yeah, you wish, Neowiz. In this shop, there's the standard items like consumables for self-resing and skill resets, costumes for your character, your mount, your pets, as well as inventory expansion and character slots, as well as extra loadout slots. I don't see anything in here that's pay to win, and looking online to see what the community thinks, I can only find old posts from before Bless release speculating if it would be, and from the looks of it, it doesn't appear to be, although some might try to argue that paying for XP potions to level up faster and skip the grind is pay to win. Their argument falls apart when you mention the max level boosts in games like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, and they don't consider those pay to win. This really isn't how I wanted the first episode of this series to turn out. I chose Bless Online as the first title to review because I had no history with it. It had just released this year, and it was an MMO that I hadn't played yet. As a number of the titles that I plan to review on this show, I've had some history with in some way or another. Unfortunately, with my experience with this game and the way the community at large feels about it, I decided to cut this review much shorter than I originally intended, as I fell down a rabbit hole when I was doing my research on how to get the game to run better, reading forum posts and the subreddit, and eventually asking the in-game community. as this opened my eyes to many things I had no idea about, and despite my best efforts, soured my opinion on Bless even more. This game is an indefinite pass, with being a complete mess in terms of performance, not doing anything different that sets it apart in the genre, and having a very small player base that's dwindling away by the day. There's really nothing here worth downloading the game to see, which is unfortunate, as I would usually tell you to download a title that's free to play if anything in the review interested you personally, regardless of what my opinions on it were, as the only thing you're at risk of losing is time. The "this game is dead" meme gets tossed around the internet a lot, all too often, but in the case of Bless, it's painfully true. Bless Online, I can confidently say, is a game you should stay away from. Unless Neowiz makes big changes soon, this game is doomed to just be another headstone in the graveyard of dead MMOs. Although there's this rather confusing concept of a game being released next year titled Bless Unleashed that's not developed by Neowiz but Round 8 Studio. All the info on the game says it's on Xbox first, which means it may be an Xbox exclusive or may come to other consoles depending on how it's received, I imagine. Round 8 claims Bless Unleashed exists in the same universe as Bless Online, and quote, uses some base art assets but rebuilt so that it feels brand new, unquote. Unleashed is being remade in Unreal Engine 4, so hopefully none of the performance issues linger. Also stating that the combat system will have timed blocking and dodging, hinting that it might be a true action combat system. I talked about Bless Unleashed so much because if it's a game that's handled properly, it may have the potential to be what Bless should have been, and I could see myself checking it out in the future. Join me next time as I take a look at a subscription game turned free-to-play that's notorious for its disjointed theme, playing favorites to a certain lolly race, and was hinted at during this review. That's a little too on the nose, isn't it?